And whenever I heard something that sounded nice to be in the background, I put it together and I took tape on each record, where to start it and where to stop it for each line. So I had a pack of phonograph records this high and a phonograph player, and I just went from that to that. Everybody thought that was very imaginative. And we did the shows, and it did very well. And the next year they did Androcles and the Lion. And Androcles and the Lion, I don't know if you know the story.
We do.
Okay. So there was nobody small enough and big enough to play with the lion and take the thorn out. So I wound up doing it. And then we did some other plays. Kim Novak was in my class. Another kid that was in my class wound up doing daytime TV, etc. And I finally, 4 years of doing that. And in the summers, one of the kids had a boat, and we would go out in the boat. And so I melted in with several people who were in that show, in that class.
Is that also where you met the other Hitchcock actress?
I don't know what
The girl from the Birds or something.
I don't.
She was at your art gallery opening. You had a special art preview.
Yeah, I know. I remember we did
say
that. No, I don't remember.
Okay, never mind.
I can't recall. Okay, so I'm through with college, and now I got to do something. Got to get a job. So the only job that I got, I lied. No. Okay, I went back to work for my father. My father had a couple of cleaning stores. And I went to work for him. And I was probably...
I can't imagine a more
sorry.
useless employee.
Okay, well, before that, in the
Knowing
summer...
you.
In the summers, no, Mike, in the summers, he got me a job driving a cleaning truck, a pretty good sized one. And I used to go pick up the laundry from the cleaners and bring it back to this union factory. And one time I got a little job delivering cars from one place to a dealer. And I remember one of the times this front seat did this. It didn't lock. And I was trying to...
You didn't think about putting
I
something
didn't have
behind
an-
it to stop it
I
from
didn't
sliding
have
backwards.
any accident, but it was, I remember that day. I couldn't wait to get rid of that car. Okay, so while I was working for my father, supposedly helping him, we would get up every morning, 6 o'clock, go to work. It was, well, like I said, I was a disappointment. I didn't do too much. Sometimes I worked the front desk where people dropped off clothes. Sometimes I did some steaming, but I was supposed to be delivering.
You were
One time
utility
I
person.
took his thing and I was driving to deliver a place, and I was listening to the radio and listening to music, and I smashed his car with all the clothes in it, with everything. I don't know how he didn't kill me. And then another time, by that time now, I was taking, while I was doing all that, I was still taking my trumpet lessons. And I was taking lessons from a guy named, I can't remember his name. And he was the second trumpet player in the band at the Chicago Theater. And I would go visit him whenever I could, so I could go backstage at the Chicago Theater. It was important to me, you know. And just smelled it all in, and I loved it. And it was like a big deal. and I would sit in the waiting room and wait. And whoever the acts were, they would hang around in the waiting room because they never left the theater. In those days, all the people who entertained in theaters, they would come in the morning, they would do 3 or 4 shows, and leave and go out late at night. So you had your food sent in, they all hung around together. But it wasn't like a show. It was a theater, music, a film, music, film, music, film, and then they would go home after 3 shows. One day, I was supposed to deliver clothes. I'm telling you bad things about it. And instead of delivering it, I thought I could spend a couple of hours and go down and see Corny Panico. His name was Corny Panico. And so I parked my car in the underneath garage near the theater. And it wasn't really a garage. It was an open area where the trains went over.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to see Corny. I had some coffee. We went and had a bite to eat. I got my kicks out of being backstage, went back to the car, and it was broken into. It wasn't a car, it was a van that used to slide all the clothes in. All the clothes were gone.
I bet your dad killed
Yeah,
you
the
there.
second time your dad should have killed you. But
Yeah.
didn't.
I don't know, again, I don't remember, but I don't know why he didn't.
Right.
At that point, it was decided that perhaps I should get a job someplace else. So it was
I can't
stupid.
believe he made you get a job after the first time. Seriously. I mean, does
seriously, I
No,
don't.
you can make a mistake once.
Yeah, but seriously,
It wasn't a mistake. He
I'm
did it
not.
on purpose. A mistake is a mistake.
No, no,
No,
listen.
he
I was
Mistake
not.
is the dog eating your beef jerky. That's a mistake.
I was not
Moving
mature.
on off
Okay,
his
she's
I-
fine now,
responsibilities to
so
play
it's
is
over.
not-
It's over.
I'm not saying I
And
don't
she's-
blame you for that
And
at
she's,
all,
ve-
Jeff.
and she's a very happy dog.
All right, let's not
Hey,
continue.
come on, let's
Let's,
hear.
All right, come on, let's
no, I'm
revert
not
back to
through.
what we're doing.
That's it.
No, I want to see
Okay.
it.
All right. You sure? You're gonna. I don't
So
want.
where did your dad? Where
I
did you
just
get a
can't
job?
believe he didn't fire you. What did he say to you?
I don't remember.
Oh my goodness,
I have to tell you, I was so immature to school, to college. I just tell you about the show, but I was not. I was like a baby. I was immature,
Sort of
impractical.
Like when Corey
I-
came here.
Yeah, I was like
No,
Corey.
no, he was.
I
Not
was
in
like
a bad way.
I
It
was-
wasn't bad, but he was like he's talking to us. Like I'm trying to get how Dad was.
right.
Like
I was like Corey, not a weirdo kid like that. I just had been
meaning
treated.
Star Wars. That's all he talked about.
Okay.
Okay, but go on. But
I looked at this time like 15 years old.
Mhm.
I'm 20.
Mhm.
I look 15.
That's not a bad thing.
20 is so young.
Yeah.
Okay. People treated me like 15.
but they treat everybody 20 like that.
I'm
He
telling you
was
what I
small.
felt. I felt like a 15-year-old or so. Things like my father, all the things now that are so important to me that I wish I had done differently, and which I've done through my life, which is going to be part of when my father came to visit your mom and I.
So how old was he when he passed?
He
60.
passed. Who?
Grandpa.
He was
Yeah.
about 60.
Yeah, he
Man.
died right before I was born. That's why I got that stupid name I have.
I like your name.
I like your name.
I don't.
Mhm.
I
He
don't know
died
why.
right before
but-
I was born. So
Okay, I'm going to
64.
continue. What she's going to mess it. No big
She's
deal.
going to the restroom.
But I was immature, really, just like Corey.
Right.
Thank you.
And Corey was 25, so I'm just saying.
Corey
My
wasn't-
whole point
Yeah.
is that Corey was 25. But look, when you were 20, every adult looks at 20. I have people I fly with
Mhm.
who are 25, and I'm just like, how in hell am I going to spend the day with this guy in the cockpit?
Okay.
Corey
But
was very
I-
well educated.
But unlike
Corey's
Corey,
very immature,
but
but
he-
all kids that age
but
are.
unlike Corey, who was grown
That's
up,
the definition of
I
immature.
was five-
Corey's at least 6 foot.
I was
you know?
5 feet tall
Right.
and looked. I could go to the movies as a kid
Mm-hmm.
till I was almost 20.
Mm-hmm.
So that affects people, or at least in my mind, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I
It
was
affects
But
Like
you were
that,
also not excelling at anything else in life.
right, and
You
so
did not excel in school.
right, hated school, did very badly in school.
But that's where you met Glenn.
Who cares? But the whole point is just
That's an important part of his life.
the whole point is that you just didn't have any direction at that point in life. You
I
just
didn't
were
even
doing what you
think
like.
about direction.
you were just doing what you like to do.
Right, woke up every morning, but I didn't think past my life
Right.
or what am I going to do.
Feel that?
Yeah.
That's
What?
how I was.
You want to say something?
No, I said that's how I was.
Okay, everybody who wants to join in anytime for questions or things, please do. But I'm
But-
just trying to explain to you where I was and what I was like.
And I think everybody at that point, I shouldn't say everybody because I've had some crazy friends, Chris Van Schacht,
Mhm.
my friend Jimmy was flying airplanes. I mean, there's just so few people who are
Focus at that age.
like if your parents had the wherewithal or you had the wherewithal back then and said, hey, why am I going to waste my time going to college? I'm going to get a job at the theater working as a grunt laborer just so I'm there every day.
Right.
Like
I-
Mark Mazzella's doing.
I went to
Right.
college because the kids I graduated with all went to college.
And that's the same reason I went to
Yeah.
college.
And I came back. And so now here I am in my 20s, got through working for my father. My only experience that I loved was that little Chicago theater experience that I thought, how lucky even to do that. And I got a job selling shoes at Chandler's Shoe Store. I don't know if there's a Chandler's, if you're that name.
No, there's
They
no
were
shoe
a
stores
national
anymore.
branch shoe store.
I sold shoes for a minute.
And all I remember about it was I wasn't a good salesman, but I sold lady shoes. And we used to have, in order to make some real money, more money than the minimum they paid,
So
you would sell extra stuff. You would sell women's pads for shoes, stocking feet, accessories that had to do with shoes. And I had the worst record of selling all those
Mhm.
things. Back up for 1 second. When I was going to Wright Junior College, I had a little car, and my job was to sell upholstery on the phone. We would call people, hi, my name is Mr. Mitchell. I understand that you're thinking of having your couch recovered and blah, and try and set up a lead for a salesman to come in and close. That was my job. And there,
Horrible job.
I got there because of and that's where Glenn Falkenstein was working, my old friend
Mhm.
from school, and we started, and one of the kids, Don Nifted, I went to college with, and so they all got those jobs, so they carried me along with them. I was also a bad phone solicitor. I had the worst sales were, they would sell people everything, and I had the worst. I had a low self-esteem.
No, you had compassion for the people you were talking to. It's trying to sell them garbage they don't need.
Okay, anyway,
I would just say you
I
were
just-
doing the jobs you
I
should
just
have been
wanted
doing.
I just wanted to fill in that little area before I went to Chandler's. And when I went to Chandler's for a job, working, I met a kid, one of the other salesmen. His name, I want to say, is Freddie Martell, but I'm not sure.
It sounds familiar.
And he wanted to be a singer, and he sang like Tony Martin, which was not very commercial, but I didn't know anything about commercial. I didn't know about anything. All I know is I liked music. And I said to him, "You should make records, right?" Irwin Flax, you would be. And he said, "Yeah, I would like to, but I don't. And don't ask me why." I said, I can help you." And I physically found a place called Universal Recording Studio. They recorded all the big hits and were doing everything. I walked in, I met the guy's wife. I said, blah, blah, blah. And she said, "Sure, we'll help you. And what you need is a band and what you need is songs." So she got us this guy who put a band together for us. He raised $500. I think we did the whole thing like a demo for $500. And we made a record. And the stupid thing about one of the songs, I chose one side, and the guy that got the band together, he chose the other side. He chose a really nice song. I chose something dramatic, and we changed the lyrics to the song so we could own it. Now, don't ask me why. I know I should have done that. And it went, "Dark eyes are flashing, come into my gypsy wagon. La da 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 da."
And they released the record?
Now that the record was recorded, I said to the woman who ran the studio, where am I going to get? In town was Mercury Records. There were several record companies in town, but she sent me to a place that was a record distributor that used to distribute other labels, and he had a little label called Chance Records, and he had one hit on Chance Records by a girl named Bonnie something. "If I knew you were coming, I'd have baked a cake, baked a cake." So that was a hit record then. And so I brought the record. He listened to the record, and he said, "Okay, I'll put it out for you. No money. I'll print up 100 records, and I will give you the 100 records, and you go around to the radio stations and get it played and see if it sells." So we said, okay. But he never pressed the record. We waited month after month after month, and finally I went in, and it became very embarrassing to him. By the way, the guy sitting at his counter that used to deal with was a guy named Abner Ewart. He became president of Motown Records. He was a black kid. Okay, and that's where I met him. It just things happen, okay? Because that comes back to later on in my life. But I'm not going to go through all the crap. But I just think this is a cute little story. So finally, we got the record. I went around to the radio stations and asked them to play it. And I thought our side was the best. So it turned out it was the Russian national anthem, and they weren't going to play Russian. We were in trouble with Russia even then.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, are you kidding us? Play da 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 da. So they played the other side. And two things happened. Only a few stations played it, but we had a show on WGN, which is still a big station in Chicago, that was like the Dick Clark show before Dick Clark. And it was a dance show. And the disc jockey's name was Dan Lounsbury, and kids came up and danced, and they would play records.
At the Hop.
No,
Philip
Hop
was
is
on the
something different,
MTV.
I'll tell you. Hop is important. Harper's important if you want to know about that era.
No.
But
But Philip was on a show like that.
Yeah.
yeah, every city had a show like that. Everybody had
Yeah, they
shows like
pop up.
that.
Philip was
Robin
high
Douglas.
school famous for being on an MTV show like that.
Okay, and this was all local. There was no organization. No things were tied together with other things, and those were the shows that when performers came into town to promote their records, and that was how they used to promote records. A performer would go into every single city, and they would play their records, and people would buy them. And there was always a dance show in town. This was done on Bird Show. And when they appeared on the show, some records would sell. And I went to the show, gave him the record, and he had Freddie Martel lip sync his record. I don't know how interesting it is to you, but to me, it was a big deal. And then there was one other show late at night called, it was in a restaurant. I can't remember, it'll come to me. Anyway, if you came to the show and sat in the restaurant, he would do an all-night disc jockey show from his restaurant. And at the end of the night, all the promotion people, all the record people, all the performers came there that was in town. And their name would get announced, and they would play their record, and he would have the performers come up, sit down, and do interviews. If you were there, you could get your record played. So I started to come there every night, 11, 12 o'clock at night. And there I met all the promotion people, and they were people who worked for the local distributor or a record company who took artists all around. And I said to myself, I really would like to do that. Again, no direction. Everything that happened to me kind of happened because I just followed a path. So poor Freddie Martel's record didn't sell. We didn't do anything more with Freddie Martel. But I had now been elevated from being associated with him to coming to this Lynn Burton's restaurant, it was called, and he used to do his, this is Lynn Burton for certain. That's how he used to start his thing. And there I met promotion people from all the town. One of the people I met was named Nat Hale. Nat Hale. Okay.
He was a big radio across the country, right?
No. Nat Hale was a gay guy who didn't seem to be gay, but he had fancy fingernails. He was very dapper with one of those mustaches, you know. And he worked for Columbia Records. And so I said, and I got friendly with him. And he used to tell me all kinds of stories. He liked me. And he told me that he played violin. He told me he was in love with Liberace, brother, not Lee.
George.
Yeah. And he
Good reference.
Okay. And he called me up one night and said, I am leaving Columbia Records. He also put out a paper, he said, called Hail Columbia, that was sent to all from the Chicago office. So he said, I'm going to leave and I'm going to recommend you for my job. And this was exactly the same time as I used to talk to Kim Novak a lot. She was making the movie Picnic. And we used to talk to her. She called me at night and tell me all about how lost she was and how unsure she was and what was going on, and she was a little frightened. And here I am talking to some little girl named Kim Novak, who is making Picnic, the movie Picnic, talking to Nat King Cole, who's telling me he's going to recommend me for his job at Columbia Records. That all came from sitting in this restaurant every
Mhm.
night.
Mhm.
One of the other people there was a guy named Dick LaPalme, and Bob DeVere, and Dick LaPalme represented Nat King Cole, Dean Martin, a lot of Capitol record artists. But he was not a promotion man; he was a publicity kid more than just with records. He used to get articles in newspapers
Mhm.
and stories. Okay, so I said to him, "Well, exactly what do you do, Nat?" He said, "Well, when artists come to town, I take them around to the radio stations. When we have a recording studio here, when some of them come in, I help conduct." They're forgetting that. I'm out.
Mhm.
You know. He says, "I also write a monthly article, newspaper." And I said, "Well, I'm out of that too. And but I know you can do it. I'm recommending you." And although he worked for Columbia as a promotion man, which is nothing, really a shitty little job, because it was Columbia Records, which was a big company, he had entree to all the stations. They had to be nice. But he became very friendly with the number one disc jockey in town, Howard Miller. And Howard Miller was like Dick Clark. Howard Miller at that time was doing the first international radio show where it was like the Tonight Show, before the Tonight Show. And they just started something called the coaxial cable. When I first moved to Chicago, you'd only get Chicago stations. You couldn't get New York. You couldn't get, everybody had their own. Then they built this coaxial cable across the country. And now, so it wasn't that long ago that television was nothing.
Mhm.
And then it was, you get the baseball games.
I remember in '76.
So,
TV would go off the air
Yep.
yeah,
at midnight.
yeah, you're
Even
lucky.
in the 80s.
Not only go off the air, there used to be a symbol that would come on
Yeah.
Yeah.
with an Indian face
Yeah.
and round things.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then they did
So-
this national anthem.
So it was around that was the time, the era. So Nat recommended me for the job.
Mhm.
And he did it through Howard Miller, who was the big disc jockey in town. Because he called all the heads of the labels, everybody called. There were like 6 or 7 disc jockeys in the country who broke record, actually play a record and it would explode.
Mhm.
Mostly from Cleveland. Columbia was class. They had a lot of big artists, but the
Rock and roll.
rock and roll was really starting to happen big time, and artists not only recorded their song. If there was a hit black song or a country song, then a lot of pop artists would all record it, and then the promotion men used to go around, and those that had the best clout got their version on the thing.
And that's what you did with Pat Booth.
Coming. So I'm shitting in my pants because I don't think I could do all the things that Nat said he did, which he didn't do. He just brought, records around and
And the other things is what he liked.
right. But then he called me and said, "Ed, I'm sorry. There was a girl named Bonnie Kroll who worked for Mercury Records as the promotion person, and she's leaving. for whatever reason. So Howard recommended her for the job. So she got the Columbia job. But he said, Howard is going into the Chicago Theater, this place that I used to be like a thing, and I have a picture of it in my phone. I will show you. Mom and I went back and we took a picture in front of. He said, and I said, what am I going to do for him? And he said, get his coat, get coffee, make sure his props are there. And I said, okay. So I quit my job making $75 a week at Chandler's to go to work for him for 1 week or 2 weeks at $50 a week to do that. And I did. So I was in the room, the main room where they were the star artists. It was the Howard Miller show, and his guests were Jerry Vale, who was just starting out. There was a dance team. I'll remember the name in a second. There was a comic named Leo DeLion, he was very funny.
Something very interesting.
He was very funny, and he could sing and whistle at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
He could and whistle, and he could do two. It was very
two different
musical.
tunes at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and and then the closing. Then they had a black group that had a hit record called "Crying in the Chapel."
All right, I'm going to interrupt for a second.
Sure.
What was the name of Leo DeLion's son?
I don't know.
Do you remember?
No, I never knew his son.
He named his son Dan.
Dan Lyon.
Dan DeLion.
Dan Lyon.
Yeah, he was a very tough kid. I met him once at
Oh,
the
yeah,
house in
yeah.
Tarzana.
All right, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Dan DeLion. What a horrible.
But in it, and that was a rich part of my memory. I remember everything about it, all the songs they sang, and after this black group that did "Crying in the Chapel," the R&B version, and became a hit. That song was covered by a girl named June Valley,
Michael's godmother.
and and I got infatuated with June Valley. Is that the right word, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
So I would sit in the dressing room. She also, by the way, she was the biggest name of all of them because she was on the Lucky Strike Hit Parade, which was a #1 national television show. And most people don't remember the Hit Parade, but that was the musical show people turned in every week to hear the #1 song, the #2 song, countdown the other way. And I used to sit around, and she used to bear to me, like my mother did, her problems. And her problems was her husband, Howard Miller. They weren't getting along together. And he had talked her into leaving the Hit Parade to come to Chicago to get married. There was something there for them at that time. And then the 2-week show turned into a 3-week show. And the movie that played all 3 weeks was Rear Window, the Alfred Hitchcock movie with Jimmy Stewart. Just so you have, that's the time that was. And now the show's over. I got no job. There's no Columbia Records. I had my little car. And I used to talk to June, not Howard. Howard didn't like me. I didn't like him.
Did you date her at all?
No, this was purely just like a young kid. She was older than me. She was more mature than me. It turned out she was very mature that I didn't know about. And she had a lot of work in Chicago. She would sing at all the clubs in Chicago. There were events from the union and this big shows, paid tons of money, and she was always the star of the show. And I used to pick her up, take her to the show, hang out with her, take her home. And then eventually we got to a point where I used to go out to dinner with them. They went to this one Hungarian restaurant. Now I'm not working for them, I'm not getting any money from them. And I remember my mother saying to me, because I lived at home, what are you doing with your life? You've got no job, you ain't moving, you go out all the time, and what good is it doing? You gotta do something.
Is this the same era that you did the Robin Hood thing?
No, before. Yeah, same era before. This was all in about a year and
Thank you,
a
Philip.
year's time.
So are you going to tell the Robin Hood story?
No, I'm not ready for that. And I don't know if I should.
Yes, you should.
I'll give you a
You absolutely should.
Okay, but
I
you all
want that
know.
on video.
Okay. So from there, driving June around, going to dinner with Howard Miller and his wife every night, my family bugging me to get a job. Howard Miller offered me a job as his assistant at the radio station. Wanted me to take the records, put them in order, and do, all that. And for one of the few times in my life, I turned something down. I said, no, I really didn't want to do it. That was not something I wanted to do, sit in the studio all day. I wanted to be a promotion person, which to me couldn't have a better job in the world. And so I turned them down. So finally, one night we were having dinner with Howard and June and one of the record distributors, not Columbia, not RCA, not Capitol. There were several distributors and they had independent labels. There was a guy named Jimmy, I forget what the name of the company was, but he was a distributor of London Records, Dot Records, lots of little company records. And we were having dinner and Jimmy said, I got to get somebody to, work for me to get these records around, just deliver the records. And Howard said, why don't you use Ed? So I finally had a job. I think I made $100 a week taking records and artists around to different radio stations. I knew the stations because I'd already done it with Freddie Martel. And the first artist I did it with on Dot Records was Pat Boone, who at that time was appearing at the Chicago Theater. It was his first theater appearance. And GAC, which was his agent, bought him 2 suits, a brown one and a black one. And that was what he wore every day on stage. And I found myself back at the Chicago Theater, where I was very comfortable, visiting with my friend Connie Panico. I was no stranger to the theater anymore. And I set up Pat for all kinds of things. There was one girl, well, I won't even go into that one, that's a stupid story. And I did a really pretty good job. And something happened working with Jimmy that wasn't very, very...
Is he the guy with the jukeboxes?
No, that's later.
Who's sleeping?
Your dog.
I'm not the dog. Wait.
Okay.
I
I'm
put the dog
listening.
right here. She's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I heard the dog.
Okay.
Ignoring.
Now,
And
I'm gonna say.
So far, anybody got any questions? Because the next, it's going to go quick, the next little part. And
I'm
that's
good.
when I get to your
No,
mom.
I'm up to speed. I've heard a lot of this.
Okay. That's why I didn't want to repeat everything. You know some of these stories. You know some
Well,
of these
I
stories.
might
Yeah,
myself
but you have to
understand
tell the
it.
Robin Hood story.
Okay. Well, this was the Robin Hood story. One of the labels he had was MGM. And a lot of people who wanted to be singers could go to MGM Records and pay $5,000 and record and get releases on MGM Records. Then it was up to them to promote. And everybody that did records in those days went to Chicago, Cleveland, Boston was an area, Pittsburgh, St. Louis was
Brian,
an
you want to sit
area.
on the couch?
No, I'm fine.
And then there was a whole area on the West Coast that wasn't really related. There was a whole different scene on the West Coast. And and I'll tell you that story again. Are you recording? Is that why you want me to tell it?
Yep.
I told it so many times. I hate this story, but the nice thing is, Mom was involved in this story.
Well, you didn't even meet Mom yet.
Well,
You're getting
that,
ahead.
not yes, and no.
Well, you met her at the record company.
Okay. The story goes, I took this girl named Robin Hood. That was her theatrical name. Her theatrical name before Robin Hood was Wendy Way. But they thought that wasn't a good enough name, so they named her Robin Hood. And my job was to take her around to the radio stations in Chicago. And then they asked me to take her to Milwaukee, which was a subsidiary market. I had never been to Milwaukee, and to promote her records. So I had a list of the disc jockeys, the radio stations to go to. I called up and made appointments for us, and we drove to Milwaukee in the evening, and we were going to radio station WOKY, which is in Hales Corners, Wisconsin, right outside of Milwaukee.
How
What
old
year
were
was
you
this?
then?
Any idea?
This was all about the time I was in my early 20s. This whole thing, that whole section, and my father and all that stuff with getting a job was in a year period. It was all.
So you're about
It
19
wasn't 5 years of activity. It was within that year's time.
So it's 1950, 1955?
Yeah, it's in the early 50s. And so going up, and it was so dark, and I guess I went through a stop sign. There was no traffic, nothing, hard to see. Trying to figure out where to go with the map. And I was pulled over by the police. And the policeman said, do you know what you did wrong or whatever? And he asked me for my name, and I said Eddie Matthews. And at that period of time, you will see that in Milwaukee, the #1 greatest player and in the All-Stars Hall of Fame today is
Baseball.
Eddie Matthews. And he said something like, what are you kidding? Why are you being so fresh? Or
Don't be a smart
what do you
ass.
think you're a smart ass? Right. Get out of the car. So I got out of the car and I was fishing to pull out my driver's license and everything. And at that same moment, he turned the flashlight on the girl who was sitting next to me, who was the artist Robin Hood. And Robin Hood was a floozy-looking Jewish girl, chubby, with frizzy blonde hair, too blonde, looked really bizarre. And he said, "Who's the broad?" And without thinking, I wasn't conscious, I said, "That's Robin Hood."
So a baseball player and a fictitious character.
So then he took my license, he looked at it, and of course my license had Eddie Matthews, and I reached over and pulled out an MGM record and showed him, and it said Robin Hood, and he started to laugh. He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to station W." It was either OKY or WEMP, one of those call letters. And he said, "You're going to get in trouble around here." He said, "Follow me, I'll take you there." And I followed him. We went to the radio station late at night, and there was a late night disc jockey. I think the guy's was Rob Thomas, but I'm not sure. And we did an interview for Robin Hood. But her interview lasted about 5 seconds. Yeah, we have a guest, Robin Hood, let's play a record, blah, blah. Because the cop had told the nighttime disc jockey this story. And he said, Ed, come sit down. Tell me this story. And so I told him the story. And the next morning, we stayed at the town hotel. I don't know if it's still there. Michael goes to Milwaukee, so he might remember. But I stayed at the town hotel. We got up early in the morning to go to the morning disc jockey. His name was Coffee Head Larson. But like I said, they had key jockeys, and he was the number one jockey. All the number one jockeys did the morning show, which was they called drive time
There's
show.
nothing in there. It's empty.
Is that relating to anybody?
Mhm.
And
Drive
so they had the biggest ratings, and they would break the records. So we were supposed to meet with Coffee Head Larson. So we got back and went back to the station, and when I entered the station, there was the cop that had picked us up, Coffee Head Larson, saying, "Come on in, you got to tell us the story." And I'm holding this record, "Please, Robin Hood." And they made me tell this story again.
That's funny.
And I made
And
television.
that day, they set up a meeting at a car dealership with Eddie Matthews, who was
The baseball.
the baseball players used to,
The
when
number
they
one
weren't
baseball
playing,
player in the country.
made side money by being like the
Right.
person. You go to a car dealership to buy a car and you meet them. And we took pictures that day of Coffee Head Larson was in the middle. I was on one side. Eddie Matthews, the baseball player, was on the other side. And Coffee Head Larson was like this. And the caption was, "Both looking for hits." Okay.
You don't have that by chance anymore, do you?
No, I
I
did.
tried looking it up.
I tried to look it up at the Review Journal, and I could not find
Yeah,
it.
I tried.
I went through everything. I really made an effort, but it was on the front page of the Milwaukee Journal.
You go into the archives.
Okay, but now, again, to tell you the era, there were no phones like you have, but promotion people used to talk to each other on the phone every day. That's how we spent all our time. "Hi, what are you playing? Who's there?" Called the disc jockeys, trying to get them to play. But we had a little association of promotion people all doing the same job for separate companies. And it wasn't a conflict. It was kind of a group that you would meet. Everybody stayed at the same hotels when you traveled to the different cities. And this story was told to all the promotion men on the phone. "Hey, did you hear?" And he said Eddie Matthews, and he said Robin Hood, and he said blah, blah, blah. And in 24 hours, that story was across the United States
In your field.
in my field.
I never heard this story.
Now,
Are you kidding?
No,
okay,
Like 10 times.
I've never heard it.
It's a great story.
It is.
when I came back Mercury Records called me and said, we are starting a new label called Wing Records. And there was a man named Sipple who was the sales manager. There was a guy named Warren Ketter who had just left the Dave Garroway TV show. Dave Garroway had a big morning show nationally on NBC. And he was one of his writers and stuff. And so he was the other person running the company. And they said, we would like you to be the regional promotion manager, which means I would work for Mercury Records or Wing Records really, and travel from Chicago, Milwaukee, Cleveland, Detroit, Pittsburgh, where else? That was pretty much my
Your
my
region?
area. And from then on, I would wake up on Monday morning and fly to one of the cities, finish up, go to radio stations, meet the other distributors of the product, because each city had a distributor and a promotion person, and then move on to the next city. I was doing 4 cities a week. Go do my job. At the end of the night, I had a card with, I want to say United. And I just used to walk to the airport, never made a phone call, jumped on the airplane, went to the next town, checked in the hotel, was picked up by the local promotion man in that city. Like I was a local promotion man in Chicago. Every city had one for each distributorship. And they would pick me up and drive me to all the radio stations. They set up all the appointments, and I would talk about records. I received the greatest acceptance than anybody ever saw. Because in every radio station I went to for the first time, and especially Cleveland, had the biggest disc jockey in the country and broke all the records, and a very tough guy to see and meet, and he didn't want to bother. You know, he had the local promotion man. He didn't want to talk to regional guys about nothing. You know. And when I got at the radio station, oh, come in, please come in, sit down. Ed, tell the story about you and... So every place I went, I must have told the story 100 times. And whether they played my records or not depended if they were hits or not. But I did very well. And I was doing for the first time in my life, I was doing a really good job. And everybody liked me and I liked everybody else. And from Wing Records, I went to work for Mercury Records, the home company.
Yeah.
And they gave me a job that with no description. They liked me. And again, you talk about working with these men who are running the company, and they always came by and said, oh, you're a good kid. What a good kid. Like I was 12 years old. You're a good kid. So they thought of me as a little kid. But they used me for projects.
That's the important thing.
And at the same time, my brother was having epilepsy problems. And they hired my brother in the accounting department. That's how that came about from yesterday's story. And one of the jobs they gave me, I worked for groups like the Crew Cuts, the Platters, Sarah Vaughan. This was all that time. And I used to take them around and didn't hang with any of them. We always hung with the promotion people at night at Lynn Burton's restaurant still. June got a divorce from Howard Miller and moved back to back to New York. I was requested to do, this is funny. They had two bands at Mercury Records. And one of the bands was called the Ralph Martiri Band, and the other band was Jimmy Dancing Shoes Palmer. And they used to make dance music. And they played at ballrooms and dance halls all around the country. But that had started to die down. There was hardly any more ballroom work. And they decided to upgrade Jimmy Palmer because they were owned by the record company. So they upgraded the Jimmy Palmer, got him all new arrangements, and made him kind of swing a little bit. And they came to me and said, we're going to book Jimmy Palmer across the country, and we want you to be his road manager and get him from Chicago to New York with all the stops in the way. And my job was to pay the musicians, give them advances, and be the road manager for the band. The only thing I can tell you that was very funny was the band always needed money, so by the time I would give them their envelope, there was nothing in there.
It's true.
Plus, we took $10 off their salary for their uniforms because we supplied them with jackets.
Yeah.
And so I went across country on this ballroom tour that I had never experienced before. And people used to come out and dance, and they play dance music and go to the next town. And I got them to New York, and we played at a very important room, and I can't remember what it was, but it was upstairs, and it was the big dance hall in downtown New York City. And I stayed, they got me a room at the Piccadilly Hotel on 45th Street and 7th Avenue, which was the heart of the theater district that today I would love to be, but it didn't mean anything to me. Theater didn't mean. West Side Story was playing at about that time. I can't remember some of the shows.
Piccadilly was famous.
Piccadilly Hotel cost $50 a week because the room they gave me was the size of a closet right next to the elevator. Had a little bathroom, a little area like that. And so I got there, I got Jimmy Palmer there, and Mercury Records said, we don't know what to do, Ed. We want to go spend time in our office and we'll find something. And while I was there, I called June Valley. And I said, how you doing? And she said, I've got all this work and all this stuff, but I'm really not very happy with blah, blah, blah. So I quit my job with them, and I went to represent her. And she was booked at every major hotel, all the big, great rooms. She played Florida twice, 3 times a year, at the Fontainebleau and the Eden Rock, the Plaza Hotel. I mean, really, she got $2,500 a week. That was the pay for singers who were on the circuit. And room for her and a room for her manager, and a room for, she would get 3 rooms, her conductor, her manager, and her. And that was one of the most awful periods of my life, because June loved doing television. For that summer, she had a television show replacing Perry Como's show. Monday, it was every night at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock, called the Chesterfield Hour. And in the summer, June and Andy Williams had a show, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Tuesdays and Thursdays it was someone named Georgia Gibbs. So for the summer she had national television. It's fine, but after the summer we go on the road, and I swear, every job we had, she would play the night, do the opening night, or perform, and somewhere along the line, I can't sing. I'm having trouble, and I had to go and cancel that engagement. I mean, dozens of times. Not in Florida, not in a couple, but she hated singing in front of an audience. And I used to sit in the back of the room with the maitre d', and this became a lesson to me and a problem people still have. She would perform on that stage. I'd be in the back of the theater restaurant, and it was boring. It never reached the back of the stage. You know, everybody clap and everything. But when she was on TV, she lit up. The camera loved her, and she did very well.
She put more oomph into it.
Yeah. And she had a lot of shows like that when we were in Chicago. But it was tough. I said, June, something is wrong that you can't. So anyway, what turned out to be wrong was that she had nodes on her vocal cord, which is typical and happens to lots of singers when they sing incorrectly. You're supposed to sing from here through your nose, not your mouth. And she was belting and singing big notes and everything. And so she went to doc, and they removed the note. So now she was out of work. I was out of work, getting $75 a week, before I was, and I would spend 5 nights a week at her place. She had a fantastic apartment in a great building, 54th and 1st. And that's the richest, the best. I used to see the people that lived in that building were all stars and big people. And I also found out from June that she was dating a bunch of guys. And I used to, but she dated Harry Belafonte, she dated, a lot of people. And I used to leave their apartment. He's coming over. Okay, I'll see you. So that infatuation that I mentioned was just meeting somebody who was a big star, who was and treated me
Like a friend.
more than a friend,
Confident.
Yeah. So I called up Mercury Records, and I said, June, if you're not working, you're not singing, and I changed agencies with her, for her. I changed record companies for her. I got her on Mercury Records. We had a couple of hits. Not number 1 hits, but top 10 hits. And I called Mercury Records now, who she was singing for. And I said, by the way, if you'd like to know, record contracts, every singer was signed, you'd get 3 recording sessions a year. It would cost you $3,000 per session.
That was a lot of money for back then.
Yeah. And
A lot of money now.
And so when you sold records, they would recoup their fees from the sales, if and when you had sales. And I called Mercury Records. Oh, Ed, great, come on back. So they gave me an office on Mercury Records in Fifth Avenue. I don't remember if it was Fifth Avenue or not. Mercury Records offices in New York.
Is that the Brill building?
No. They had their own physical building and office. And they gave me an office next to, who's the guy that did Michael Jackson?
Quincy Jones.
Quincy Jones. He was one of the A&R people. It's a guy named Mooney who later on was also one of their house arrangers. Promotion guy. They had a promotion guy who lived. He had an office.
The Mooney guy was a black guy?
No,
Oh, okay.
he did a lot of movies. You'd see his name on a lot of movies. And I had no job. Had an office. They said, Ed, I got a paycheck every week. And once in a while, they would call me to do something. And I want you to go to Denver, first time I went to Denver, Colorado, to close up the distributorship. Count the records that they had, cut them in a truck, fly back home. I have other stories about that that are nothing. Anyway, I was there. I did nothing. I got paid. They loved me. The president of the company, Irv Green, loved me. This guy, Art Talmadge, who was running the company, the A&R thing, he loved me. The salespeople loved me. And I had a job at Mercury
Everybody
Records.
loves you, Pop.
No.
So is Grandma happy that you finally had a job?
Oh, no. Now let's talk about that for a second because that's another one of my guilty feelings.
Okay. Can we take a 5-minute break?
Yeah, I could use one.
Go.
5 minutes, everybody. I just want to have a cup of coffee
Okay.
and use the restroom.
I'm just going to get some.
And Nikki, if you want to put your clothes in the dryer, I'm sure they're done.
Oh, shit. Did my clothes go in there with you?
I think so.
They're going in the dryer.
Oh, okay.
You
I
can
know
put
I
your
put them somewhere. I don't know where.
clothes in the
Drink.
washing machine.
Okay. I'm sorry I'm taking so long for this, but I want to get to Mom.
All right.